So hello fellow Earthlings. This is Earthling 6455463728. And I saw that not only has China passed laws to give itself the power to crack down on Hong Kong, but that Nancy Pelosi has led sanctions in, I believe it's the US Congress, against China. I don't know if they'll actually pass in the Senate, but it's interesting that the US would try to do something like that. Unfortunately, the problem, if that is the way of saying it, is that the West and the US, so including the US, really doesn't have much leverage on China, and for that matter, it really doesn't have much high ground, much moral high ground at all to look down on China from. If we want to look at the most recent thing that happened, we can see how Donald Trump dealt with the people who were protesting across from the White House. It was something that many people, Republicans even, came out against him for that. It was comical, him standing up holding a Bible after allowing federal security people to do that to the people who were protesting without even giving them a warning. They're just horses and tear gas and rubber bullets and basically beaten up even on the foreign press. I think it was a camera crew and a reporter from New Zealand, and nobody even gave them the opportunity to leave quietly. And then there is how the government actually reacted, beating up on peaceful protesters in the middle of the day. People who were rioting, maybe, but people who were just standing up, and again, without warning, we can see what happened to the old man that was pushed down and then accused of being part of Antifa. It's a lot to take in. Then if you want to look at the UK for itself, the UK, even in dealing with, not even, well, I guess they were minorities, in Northern Ireland, did not really have a good track record of reaching out to those people and listening to what their issues were. So, it was a while ago, but still, right now, if we look at what's happening in Catalonia in Spain, they would like to secede. I don't think that Spain is really sitting down with them to hear what their concerns are. I think the people, some of them have fled the country in order to get away from Spain trying to arrest them and charge them with crimes. I'm sure the same thing would happen if any of England's or Britain's foreign territories tried to get away from Britain, and they protested in the same way that the Hong Kong people are protesting. I'm pretty sure the same thing would happen in a case like that. When you look at minorities across the Western world, whether they might be the Roma people, whether they might be the native peoples in Canada, whether you might look at native peoples in USA, black people, Hispanic people, even Asian people. If you look into it, Asian people do not get, let's say, well, now we're talking about pay, but paid as highly as white people do. Even in the US, they just normally happen to exceed the qualifications of white people in the US, so it seems as if they get paid that high. There's also the matter of they aren't paid more than white people, and they don't earn more really when you account for rural areas. They're concentrated in the cities in high standard of living locations. So a lot of that money that they get in earnings is eaten away by the cost of living. And of course, all Asians are not even treated the same in the US. Sure, Chinese, let's say Pakistani, Indian Americans may earn on the high end, but there are Filipinos and many other people who do not earn a lot of money. As a matter of fact, as a group, Asians have the highest disparity in income. So let's not forget the fact that the US actually has a surveillance state. That's the reason why Snowden is in Russia for the longest period of time. And it's not to say that as if people abandoned it. The US has been using these type of, I guess that's part of the reason why Republicans are the way they are and the NRA is the way that they are, because of some of these revelations. But at the same time, I'm sure Republicans want to prosecute Snowden even more than Democrats might want to. And you shouldn't forget the Tuskegee Airmen, how they were used and experimented upon. There are other things like Intel Pro, where people were given hallucinogenic drugs by the CIA to see if they can get something like a Manchurian candidate, somebody that they can use and control, and the person then would have no memory of what they did. This is actually true. And the CIA just basically said we were never able to succeed, but they never came clean and said what it was that exactly that they did. They destroyed the records to make sure that people wouldn't know. And then there's Nixon himself, who supposedly came out against or put drugs supposedly or encouraged crack in the black community, also suppressing the Black Panthers and other civil rights groups. So if we really look at it, the way that the US, the UK, Spain in terms of Catalonia wanting to secede, actually some of these places, if we want to point the way that Israel treats the Palestinians, how they've annexed territory and are continuing to annex territory, and they're supposed to be a democracy, and Israel is saying that Israel is really for the Jewish people and not for anybody else. The way that they have treated Jewish people, non-white Jewish people in Israel, I think the word is unconscionable. I really should look that up. I've never looked that up, but I think that its use is appropriate here. It's a lot of things. The way that the U.S. itself has intervened and used military force in other countries, even on pretexts, like the way that the U.S. created the state of Panama and then leveraged or forced by military forced the Panamanians to give up control of the Panama Canal. We can see how Hong Kong itself became a UK territory by force. I don't know if the Hong Kong people appreciate the irony of that their freedom that they love so much now, and I would love it too, but I guess we're trying to be objective here. The freedom they have was obtained by force, by forcing China to give up Hong Kong, because they didn't want to allow the UK or Britain to sell opium in China. And then, the UK, I think is it the English East India Trading Company? They pretty much own the government, I think it is. They pretty much attacked China, took Hong Kong for the trouble of having China destroy the opium, and it forced freedom on Hong Kong. And now Hong Kong is being forced back under the rule, I suppose, of China. I didn't get too much into the leverage or the fact that the West has very little leverage on China, but it does have very little leverage on China. The worst case scenario, the nuclear option, is that China, as they say, could stop sending antibiotics to the West. I don't know about Europe, but the US does not manufacture any antibiotics because it's a dirty, nasty process, and the countries and the people don't like the pollution that results from making antibiotics, because there's a lot of solvents involved just to extract, things like penicillin, etc. But, in terms of, we can see what happened when China stopped accepting garbage. They stopped accepting garbage, and the world was in turmoil. All of these quote-unquote recycling efforts turned out to be just dumping stuff in China. And that's what happened from garbage. What happens when China decides that they're not going to make phones? What happens when China decides they're not going to make PPE? What happens when China decides that they're not going to make antibiotics for the West? They're not going to export a lot of these rare earth metals and other things in China. Unfortunately, rich corporations and even the consumers, by constantly seeking the cheapest option, have put the family jewels of their countries into China's jaws. And hopefully China never bites. It will probably mean, it's a nuclear option, but it's a possible option. So anyway, guys, wish me lucks. You can like or unlike, comment, subscribe, and or share. LUSCSS. And of course, it's not preferred, but you can do nothing. Peace.